I sat in my car outside my parents' house holding the wedding invitations that Helene and I had just picked up. 14 months of planning, saving, dreaming together. My younger brother Brandon had always been the golden child, the one who needed protection, the one who got everything. But today was supposed to be different. Today I was going to share our joy with family. When I walked through that front door, my parents sat at the dining table with grave expressions. A stack of bank documents lay between them. Before we dive into this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If this is your first time here, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt that your entire future was about to be rearranged without your permission? Stay with me because what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. I grew up in a quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. Our neighborhood was the kind where everyone knew each other's names, where kids played in the streets until the sun went down, and where families looked out for one another. My father worked as an electrician for the same company for 27 years. My mother was a nurse at the local hospital, pulling 12-hour shifts to keep our family comfortable. We were not wealthy, but we never went without. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. 2 parents, 2 sons, a modest house with a decent backyard. But inside our home there was an unspoken rule that I learned to accept from a very young age. My younger brother Brandon, 3 years my junior, was different. He was the baby. He was sensitive. He needed extra care, extra attention, extra everything. When Brandon struggled in school, my parents hired tutors. When I struggled, they told me to work harder. When Brandon wanted the newest video game console, it appeared under the Christmas tree. When I asked for a used car to drive to my part-time job, I was told to save up and buy it myself. I did not resent this at the time. I told myself that being the older brother meant being stronger, more independent. I wore my self-reliance like a badge of honor. By the time I turned 16, I was working at a grocery store after school. I saved every dollar I could. When college came around, I applied for scholarships, took out loans, and worked 2 jobs to pay my own way. I graduated with a degree in accounting and landed a decent job at a firm downtown. Not once did I ask my parents for money. Not once did they offer. Brandon, on the other hand, took a different path. He enrolled in college, dropped out after 1 semester because he did not like his major. He enrolled again the following year, switched programs twice, and eventually stopped attending classes altogether. Through all of this, my parents continued to support him. They paid his rent. They bought his groceries. They gave him spending money whenever he asked. The pattern was so deeply ingrained that I stopped questioning it. That was just how our family worked. Then I met Helene. It was 4 years ago at a local harvest festival. I was standing in line for apple cider when I noticed her ahead of me. She had this warm smile that seemed to light up everything around her. We started talking about the weather, then about the festival, then about everything else. By the time we reached the front of the line, I knew I wanted to see her again. Helene was a 2nd-grade teacher at an elementary school on the east side of town. She had a gentle way about her, a patience that I had never encountered before. She listened when I talked. She remembered the small things. She made me feel seen in a way that I had not experienced growing up. Her own story was marked by loss. Both of her parents had passed away before she turned 25. Her father from a heart attack, her mother from cancer 2 years later. The only family she had left was her grandmother, a kind woman in her 80s who lived in a small apartment near the school where Helene worked. Despite everything she had been through, Helene carried no bitterness. She spoke of her parents with love, cherished her grandmother deeply, and approached life with a quiet optimism that drew me to her. We dated for 2 years before I proposed. I did not plan anything elaborate. I took her to the park where we had our first real date, the one with the wooden bridge over the creek. I got down on one knee near that bridge as the autumn leaves fell around us. When she said yes, I felt like I had finally found my place in the world. We started planning our wedding immediately. Neither of us wanted anything extravagant. We agreed on a modest ceremony at a small farm venue outside the city. 80 guests, close friends and family only. Helene spent weekends crafting decorations by hand. She made centerpieces from mason jars and wildflowers. She designed our invitations herself. Every detail reflected who we were as a couple. Over 14 months, we saved $22,000. We deposited funds for the venue, the catering service, the photographer, and a local band that Helene loved. We were careful with every expense. We ate at home instead of going out. We skipped vacations. We put every spare dollar toward our future together. My parents never offered to contribute to the wedding. I did not expect them to. I had stopped expecting anything from them years ago. What mattered was that Helene and I were building this together on our own terms with our own resources. The day the invitations arrived from the printer, I could not contain my excitement. I drove to my parents' house that evening, planning to show them the beautiful cards that Helene had designed. I imagined my mother smiling, maybe even getting a little emotional. I imagined my father nodding with approval. What I found instead shattered every illusion I had left about my family. The moment I stepped through the front door, I knew something was wrong. The house was too quiet. Usually my mother would have the television on in the background or music playing from the kitchen. But that evening there was nothing, just silence, heavy and suffocating. My parents were sitting at the dining room table. My father stared at the wood surface, his hands clasped together. My mother looked up when I entered, and I saw something in her eyes that I could not immediately identify. Fear, maybe. Or desperation. Between them lay a stack of papers, official-looking documents with the logo of a bank I recognized. I sat down slowly, the wedding invitations still in my hand. My mother spoke first, her voice trembling slightly. She said that the family was going through something difficult. She said that they needed to have an honest conversation with me. She said that Brandon was in trouble. I waited, my stomach tightening with each word. My mother continued. She explained that Brandon had developed a gambling problem over the past 2 years. It started small, she said. Sports betting with friends. Then online poker. Then casino trips that became more frequent, more reckless. By the time my parents discovered the extent of his addiction, Brandon had accumulated debts totaling $120,000. I sat there, unable to process what I was hearing. $120,000. My brother, the one who had been handed everything, had gambled it all away and then some. My father finally spoke. His voice was flat, defeated. He told me that they had taken out a second mortgage on the house to pay off part of Brandon's debt. They had given everything they could. But there was still $45,000 remaining, and the people Brandon owed money to were not patient creditors. They had made threats. They had shown up at Brandon's apartment. I looked at the bank documents on the table, the second mortgage. My parents had put their home on the line for Brandon, the house they had lived in for 30 years, the house where I grew up, and they had done it without telling me, without even hinting that anything was wrong. My mother reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. Her touch was gentle, but her words cut through me like a blade. She asked if I could postpone the wedding. I thought I had misheard her. I asked her to repeat what she had just said. She explained further. She said that Helene and I were young. We had time. A year or 2 would not make a difference. But Brandon needed help now. If we could just delay the wedding, use the money we had saved to help clear his remaining debt, everything would be okay. She promised they would pay us back eventually when things settled down. I looked at my father. He would not meet my eyes. I asked them if they knew how much we had saved for the wedding. I asked if they understood what Helene and I had sacrificed over the past 14 months. My mother admitted that she did not know the exact amount. She had assumed it was enough to make a difference. $22,000. 14 months of our lives. Countless hours of Helene's careful planning. All of it dismissed as a resource to bail out my brother from his own choices. I asked where Brandon was. Why was he not here explaining himself, taking responsibility for the mess he had created? My mother's expression shifted. She told me that Brandon was going through a psychological crisis. He was fragile. He could not handle the pressure of confronting his mistakes right now. She said I could not expect him to deal with this in his current state. As if on cue, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Brandon appeared in the doorway of the dining room. He was wearing a casual shirt and designer jeans. His hair was styled. In his hand he held the latest model smartphone, the screen still glowing from whatever he had been doing upstairs. This was not a man in crisis. This was a man who had learned that someone else would always clean up after him. Brandon leaned against the doorframe and looked at me. His tone was casual, almost dismissive. He said that I should help him out this one time. He pointed out that I was only going to get married once anyway, so postponing it for a few years would not be a big deal. I felt the blood rushing to my head. My hands gripped the wedding invitation so tightly that the paper crumpled at the edges. Brandon continued. He said that Helene would understand. He called her sweet and easygoing. He said she would definitely agree to wait if I explained the situation. My mother nodded along with his words. She agreed that Helene was a good person and would surely be supportive of helping family. That was when I realized the full picture. This conversation had been planned. My parents and Brandon had discussed this before I arrived. They had already decided what they wanted. They just needed me to comply. Helene and I were not people with our own dreams and plans. We were a solution to their problem. I stood up from the table without saying a word. I walked out of that house with the crumpled invitations still in my hand. Behind me, I heard my mother calling my name. I did not look back. The drive home felt endless. My mind raced through everything that had just happened, trying to make sense of it, trying to find some angle where my family's request was reasonable. I could not find one. When I walked through the door of our apartment, Helene was sitting on the couch reading a book. She looked up with a smile that faded the moment she saw my face. She knew me well enough to recognize when something was deeply wrong. I sat down beside her and told her everything. I told her about Brandon's gambling addiction, about the second mortgage, about the $45,000 still owed to dangerous people. I told her what my parents had asked of us. I told her what Brandon had said about her, how he had spoken of our wedding as an inconvenience, how he had assumed she would simply go along with whatever served him. Helene listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked me a simple question. She asked how I felt. Something broke inside me at those words. For the first time since I was a child, I cried. Not just tears, but deep, shaking sobs that I could not control. I told Helene about all the years of standing in Brandon's shadow. I told her about the jobs I worked to pay my own way while my parents handed everything to my brother. I told her about convincing myself that this was normal, that being independent was simply what older siblings did. I told her that I had spent my entire life believing that if I just worked hard enough, asked for nothing and caused no trouble, I would eventually earn my place in my own family. Helene held me while I cried. She did not try to fix anything. She did not offer solutions or platitudes. She simply held me and let me feel everything I had been suppressing for decades. When I finally grew quiet, she spoke. Her voice was steady and clear. She told me that I did not owe anyone my future. She reminded me that we had worked hard for our wedding together every step of the way. She said that our life together was not a bargaining chip for someone else's mistakes. In that moment, I understood why I loved her. Helene was not just my partner, she was my home. The days that followed were exhausting. My mother called constantly. She cycled through every tactic she could think of. She appealed to my sense of duty as an older brother. She reminded me of childhood memories, trying to invoke guilt. She warned me that if something happened to Brandon because of his debt, I would carry that regret forever. My father called less often, but each conversation left me feeling hollow. He told me he was disappointed in me. He said he had raised me better than this. He could not understand why I was being so selfish. Brandon did not call. Instead, he sent text messages that blamed me for his stress. He wrote that my refusal to help was making his situation worse. He never once apologized. He never once acknowledged that his choices had led us here. Then the extended family got involved. My mother had clearly been working the phones. Relatives I had not spoken to in months suddenly had opinions about my wedding. My Aunt Linda called one evening. She told me I should think about my parents. They were getting older, she said. They did not need this kind of stress. She implied that I was being cruel by prioritizing my wedding over family harmony. I tried to explain the full situation, but she cut me off. She had already made up her mind. In her eyes, I was the villain. A week after my initial conversation with my parents, my mother called with an invitation. She wanted the whole family to come together for dinner. She said it was important for everyone to reconnect, to remember that we were still a family despite our differences. I knew it was a trap. Everything about her tone told me she had an agenda. But I also knew that avoiding the confrontation would only delay the inevitable. If I was going to stand my ground, I needed to do it completely. I told Helene about the dinner. I gave her the choice to stay home if she preferred. She looked at me with those steady eyes and said she was coming with me. We were in this together. The night of the dinner, we drove to my parents' house in silence. My stomach churned with anticipation. I did not know exactly what would happen, but I knew that something would change forever that evening. We arrived to find multiple cars in the driveway. Inside, the dining room table had been extended to accommodate additional guests. My parents sat at one end. Brandon sat across from two empty chairs that were clearly meant for us. Aunt Linda was there along with Uncle Robert and my grandmother. My mother greeted us with forced cheerfulness. She guided us to our seats. The meal began with small talk that felt painfully artificial. Everyone commented on the food, the weather, anything to avoid the real reason we had all gathered. Then halfway through dinner, my mother steered the conversation. She mentioned casually that her eldest son had been considering postponing his wedding to help the family through a difficult time. She looked around the table seeking support. She described me as a wonderful older brother who understood the importance of family sacrifice. She was trying to trap me. By announcing my supposed decision in front of everyone, she was forcing me to either agree publicly or look like the bad guy for refusing. I glanced at Helene beside me. Under the table, she found my hand and squeezed gently. That small gesture gave me the courage I needed. I stood up from my chair. The conversation stopped. Every eye in the room turned to me. I spoke calmly but firmly. I told them the truth. All of it. I explained that Brandon had accumulated over $100,000 in gambling debt. I told them that my parents had taken a second mortgage on their home without telling anyone. I explained that they had asked me to cancel my wedding and give them the money Helene and I had saved for 14 months so they could pay off my brother's remaining debts. The room was silent. Aunt Linda's expression shifted from judgment to shock. Uncle Robert set down his fork. My grandmother watched me with an unreadable face. I continued. I talked about my life. I told them about working since I was 16 years old. I told them about paying my own way through college while Brandon dropped out twice on our parents' dime. I told them about never asking for anything, never expecting anything, and building my life through my own efforts. Then I talked about Helene. I told them that she had lost both her parents before she turned 25. I told them that our wedding was not just a party, it was a chance for her to finally have a family again. I told them that taking this away from her was something I would never do. Brandon tried to interrupt. He pushed back his chair and started to speak. But my grandmother raised her hand, silencing him. She told him to let me finish. I looked directly at my parents. I told them that I loved them, but I would not sacrifice my future for someone who refused to take responsibility for his own choices. I said I was willing to help Brandon find resources, counseling programs, financial advisors, support groups for gambling addiction, but I would not give him money, not a single dollar, because giving him money had never helped him. It had only enabled him to continue making the same mistakes. I took Helene's hand. We stood together. I told my family that our wedding would happen as planned. Anyone who wanted to be there was welcome. Anyone who could not support us was making their own choice. We left before dessert. The aftermath of that dinner was complicated. For 2 weeks, my mother did not call. The silence was strange after so many years of our complicated relationship. Part of me felt relief. Another part felt grief for the family I had always wanted but never truly had. My father sent a single text message during that time. He wrote that he needed time to think about everything. It was not an apology, but it was not an attack either. I took it as a small sign. Brandon blocked me on every platform. Social media, phone, everything. He wanted nothing to do with me now that I had refused to rescue him. I was surprised to find that his rejection did not hurt as much as I expected. Perhaps I had already grieved the brother I wished he could be. But there were unexpected developments too. My grandmother called me privately a few days after the dinner. She told me she was proud of me. She said she had watched the family dynamics for years and had worried about both Brandon and me, though, for different reasons. She was glad I had finally spoken up. She promised she would be at my wedding. Aunt Linda also reached out. Her message was brief but sincere. She apologized for judging the situation before understanding it fully. She said she wanted to support us. These small moments of connection reminded me that family is not a single unified block. It is made up of individuals, each with their own capacity for growth and understanding. The wedding took place on a beautiful Saturday in early October. The farm venue looked exactly as Helene had envisioned it. Wildflowers lined the aisle. Mason jar lanterns hung from the old oak trees. The band played softly as guests arrived. My parents did not come. I had sent them an invitation. I had left the door open. They chose not to walk through it. That was their decision to make. But my grandmother came. Aunt Linda came. Uncle Robert came. Helene's grandmother sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face as she watched the granddaughter she had helped raise prepare to start a new chapter. When I saw Helene walking toward me in the dress she had helped design herself, everything else faded away. The years of feeling unseen by my own family, the impossible request they had made, the painful confrontation, none of it mattered in that moment. What mattered was the woman in front of me, the life we were choosing to build together. We exchanged vows near the wooden arbor covered in climbing roses. I promised to love her, to support her, to build a home where she would always belong. She promised the same. When we kissed, the guests cheered. Her grandmother laughed through her tears. My grandmother reached over and squeezed Helene's grandmother's hand. Two elderly women, each having lost so much, finding connection through us. That day I understood something important. Family is not defined by blood alone. Family is defined by choice, by presence, by the willingness to show up for each other when it matters most. 3 months after the wedding, my mother called. Her voice was different than I remembered. Softer. More hesitant. She did not apologize directly. That kind of open acknowledgement has never been easy for her. But she asked how I was doing. She asked how Helene was doing. She asked about our new apartment. It was a beginning, not a resolution, but a beginning. I do not know what the future holds for my relationship with my parents. There are wounds that may never fully heal. There are conversations that still need to happen. But I have learned that healing does not require forgetting. It requires boundaries. It requires honesty. It requires the courage to say no when saying yes would cost you everything. Looking back, I realize that the moment my parents asked me to cancel my wedding was also the moment I finally found my own voice. For years, I had accepted the role they assigned me, the reliable one, the invisible one, the one who never needed anything. Refusing their request was not an act of selfishness. It was an act of self-respect. If you are watching this and you find yourself standing at a crossroads where love for your family and respect for yourself seem to pull in opposite directions, I want you to know something. You can honor your family without dishonoring yourself. You can love people and still refuse to let them use you. You can walk away from expectations that would destroy you and still leave the door open for future healing. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply to keep walking toward your own happiness. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set a difficult boundary with family? How did you find the strength to stand your ground? Share your story in the comments below. If this video resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message today, share this video with them. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for being part of this community. I wish you courage in your own journey, peace in your decisions, and the kind of love that makes every struggle worth it.